Today it is my esteemed honor to welcome Supervisor Rex Scott. Recently, Rex has become known quite well for challenging a state gun law. And, you know, we're all sick of gun violence. And he is working on the repeal of a state law that forbids local communities from taking steps for gun safety and public safety. And the supervisors, by a majority vote, agreed to pursue that. And Rex is a Democrat. He was elected to represent District 1 in 2020. And this is quite an achievement because before that, the district was primarily Republican. And in 1991, Rex taught social studies at Flowing Wells Junior High School. And in 2000, he started his 19-year career as an administrator in middle and high schools. And with that, Rex, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Really appreciate the invitation. Delighted to be with everybody today. It's wonderful to see so many familiar names and faces. I want to give a special shout out to Marion Pickens, who served Southern Arizona for many years in the Arizona legislature. And Marion, very proud that you're on the call with us today. Before I started talking about the gun measure that Larry mentioned during his introduction, I wanted, and also some other matters that have been taking up the business of the Board of Supervisors, and also making sure to leave plenty of time for your questions. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the results of redistricting. And just like the legislative and congressional districts have to revise their boundaries after every census, so do the Board of Supervisors throughout all 15 Arizona counties. And what we do in Pima County is each supervisor appoints one person to an independent commission to take a look at the boundaries for the districts. And it is required that the districts be fairly equal in terms of population. And there are also some federal constraints that we need to keep in mind with regard to the majority minority districts. Those would be District 2, represented by Supervisor Hines, and District 5, represented by Supervisor Grijalva. Because the greatest amount of growth in population between the 2010 and the 2020 census occurred in my district, District 1, and District 4, which is represented by Supervisor Christie, both of our districts needed to lose population. And the most significant results for District 1 are that when I was elected in November of 2020, and many of you know that I was the first Democrat to be elected to represent District 1 since 1972. When I was elected to represent District 1 in November of 2020, the Republicans had a slight voter registration edge. They had about 2,500 more registered voters than the Democrats did. And there was also a significant number of independents, right around 30% of the electorate. As a result of redistricting, this is now, and it's by a small margin, but this is now a majority Democratic district. There are about 1,500 more Democrats in District 1 than there are Republicans. It will still be a very competitive district. And the key to winning the district will be to keep the Democrats home and to win the independents, because the independents are right around 31% of the electorate within District 1. The main reason that we have become what was a marginally Republican district and is now a marginally Democratic district is because almost all of Marana got shifted over to District 3, Supervisor Bronson's district. And Marana, if you look at voter registration by town, Marana is a majority Republican town. So all of the Marana precincts, except for one, are now in Supervisor District 3. I had about 45% of those Marana precincts before redistricting. We also picked up some precincts south of the river, mostly bounded by River Road, Craycroft Road, Swan Road, and Grant Road. And those are some pretty reliably Democratic precincts that we picked up in that area. So that's why the district is now gone from being marginally Republican to marginally Democratic. District 2 and District 5 remain strongly Democratic districts. Honestly, the Republicans have next to no chance of winning in either of those districts. The battle in those districts will always be in the Democratic primary. District 3 is a little bit more Republican than it was before, but there is still a Democratic voter registration edge in District 3 of about 8 to 9%. And District 4, which is the only district that is currently represented by a Republican, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the numbers in that district, if we were to find a solid Democratic candidate who could keep the base and could also get independents, we could make District 4 Democratic as well. So that's something we should be thinking about moving into 2024. Now, Larry was kind enough to mention Arizona Revised Statute 13-3108 in his introduction. And that is what is known as a preemption statute. And around the country, ladies and gentlemen, the National Rifle Association and its allies are using these preemption statutes to prevent local governments from taking virtually any action to deal with gun safety or gun violence. They first put this statute in place in the early 2000s. And anytime it looks like local governments are trying to find a way to get around its restrictions, the legislature goes back and strengthens it. Now, I've been on the board a little bit more than a year and a half, and there were really two things that happened that motivated me to want to try and challenge this statute, both politically and potentially legally. The first is that there is a nonprofit commission that the county charges with overseeing the fairgrounds. And that nonprofit commission over the years has allowed a gun show promoter, Crossroads of the West. They run gun shows throughout the West to have gun shows on the Pima County Fairgrounds about twice a year. And those gun shows allow private sellers without federal firearms licenses. Private sellers without federal firearms licenses do not have to conduct background checks. That's famously known as the gun show loophole. When we sought advice from County Attorney Laura Conover and her staff as to whether or not either we or that nonprofit commission could require that only sellers with federal firearms licenses should be able to participate in those gun shows, we were told by the county attorney that if we tried to do that, or if the commission tried to do that, it would run afoul of this state statute. And we went at that in many different directions. We have released every legal opinion that we got from the county attorney on this subject. We've removed attorney-client privilege from those documents. And if you want to see any of those opinions, dating back to January of 2021, just contact the clerk of the board's office, or I think Larry has all of them, but I can send them to you as well. And you'll see all the ways that we tried to get around this, and the answer from our attorney was no go. Similarly, about a month and a half ago, I wrote to the county attorney to find out if Pima County could put in place a red flag law. Red flag laws mostly exist in the states. I think there's right around 19 states that have them. And what they do is if somebody who is known to be in possession of a firearm is making statements or engaging in behavior that indicates that they are a threat to themselves or to other people, law enforcement can come in and can take appropriate action. Governor Ducey, believe it or not, tried to put a red flag law in place shortly, I believe, after the Parkland High School shooting in Florida in 2018. He was told in no uncertain terms by the other members of his party in the Arizona legislature that that wasn't going to go anywhere. Counties are the regional public health authority under state law. And so I asked the county attorney, would it be possible for the county to debate and hopefully enact a red flag law? Again, I was told that this statute prevented us from doing so. So what this resolution that we passed says is, number one, we will call on the new governor and the new legislature that take office in January to repeal that statute, ARS 13-3108. But we have also asked Ms. Conover and her staff to take the next 3 months to do legal research to find out how we could challenge both the constitutionality and legality of that statute. And they're supposed to get back to us by November 15th. We have heard from a former state legislator who is also an attorney about his willingness to help us with this. We have also heard from the Everytown for Gun Safety organization, because they have some legals who might be able to help us with this. And again, preemption statutes are not unique to Arizona. As I said at the beginning of my remarks, the NRA has had them in place. It tries to put them in place in all of the states. So that's where we are with that. And when we get to the question and answer time, Larry, I'm happy to answer any other questions about this matter. Something else that is of recent interest, not just to the board, but to every registered voter in Pima County, is that in our recent primary election, Pima County became the 12th of the 15 counties to use vote centers for people who choose to vote in person on election day. Now, right around high 70s or low 80s percentile people choose to vote by mail, but there are about 20% more or less of Pima County voters who vote in person. And what we did is, again, we became the 12th of the 15 counties to go away from the precinct model, where you can only vote in the precinct that's assigned to your neighborhood, to the vote center model, which allows you to vote in any one of the 129 vote centers that we had set up on primary election day. We also became the last of the 15 Arizona counties to use what are known as electronic poll books to check in our voters and confirm their voter status. Before that, we had to use paper registers. And precinct workers had to scratch out the names of all the people on those paper registers who had voted by mail. It was a very labor-intensive process that was that really has become certainly fraught in terms of human error, the potential for human error. I am pleased to tell you, and we are waiting on an after-action report from the Division of Elections and the county recorder, but I'm pleased to tell you that that was a very successful exercise back earlier this month. There are some things that we need to do differently or better between now and November, but a lot of the gloom and doom predictions that were made mostly by people in the other party who have bought into the big lie and all the other tactics that are being used to question and undermine our voting systems. I mean, for crying out loud, Shelley Keiss, the Republican county chair, even put out an email back when we were debating vote centers, saying that if we went to vote centers and e-poll books, we were going to make ourselves subject to Russian hacking. She actually said that. And we heard similarly outrageous comments from other people, again, mostly in the Republican Party, who buy into the Trumpian rhetoric about the only way to vote is on election day in person. But Arizonans not only prefer to vote by mail, but most Arizonans, including in some very conservative counties like Yavapai and Cochise, have been using vote centers to vote wherever they want for many years. And now Pima County is in that position. And I'm going to put that after action report on a board agenda so that we can talk with the public about how well things went in August and how wrong some of those predictions about vote centers and e-poll books were. And I'm very, very grateful to our county recorder, Gabriela Caceres Kelly, and also our elections division director, Constance Hargrove, and their staffs for the great work they did in August that they're going to continue in November. We also last year put in place a program that provides scholarships to families that want to send their child to preschool. Now, you may not be aware of this if your kids are grown and out of the house, but the average cost of preschool in Pima County is $800 per month per child. That's extraordinary. And obviously, the people who are most challenged to pay those costs are the people who are challenged by everything else in our economy, paying their rent, their mortgage, putting gas in their car, put food on their table, paying their bills. And so we put a program in place that says that if your family income is at a certain level, Pima County will give you a scholarship that you can use to send your child to preschool. And last year we helped 800 kids who would not have gone to preschool otherwise. This academic year that just started, we're likely to come close to doubling those numbers. And our goal is to get to the point where any parent who wants to send their child to preschool in Pima County is going to be able to do so, and cost is not going to be a barrier. Because when cost is a barrier, then it's children from those families who are at a disadvantage compared to children from families who have no trouble paying the tuition. We are using American Rescue Plan Act funds to pay for the program both last year, this year, and next year. And then after that, we're going to use a combination of local funds to pay for the program. We got permission from the legislature and, again, believe it or not, Governor Ducey, to use a portion of the property tax that funds the library district to help fund the program moving forward. So it's a stable source of funding that we can count on from years to come, as long as there's a majority on the Board of Supervisors that will support this program. It only passed by a 3-2 vote when we put it in place last year. So it's important that we keep a pro-preschool majority on the Board of Supervisors moving forward. And by the way, those preschools are provided not only by the local K-12 districts, but also by a lot of folks in the nonprofit sector. And we have a partnership with the United Way, where this program through the United Way is helping all local preschools to get up to the standards that are required by the state of Arizona for preschool providers. So really proud of that program. Also proud of the fact that we have a roads program in place that, believe it or not, was passed unanimously by the last Board of Supervisors. Yes, it was not only supported by all three of the Democrats on the last board. It was also supported by the 2 Republicans, including Allie Miller, who had my seat before I was elected in 2020. And this program uses a combination of local and state funds to pave and otherwise repair the roads that are the responsibility of the county. And the roads that are the responsibility of the county are the roads that are in unincorporated Pima County. If a road is within the boundaries of a jurisdiction, they're the responsibility of that jurisdiction, whether it be Marana, Oro Valley, Tucson, Sahuarita, South Tucson. And there are also state roads within the county. For example, Oracle Road. Another name for Oracle Road is State Highway 77. So the state's responsible for those roads, but all roads in unincorporated Pima County are the responsibility of the county. When the condition of those roads was assessed back in 2019, 70% of them, 7 out of 10, were found to be in poor or failed condition. We are using this program, which again uses a combination of state and local funds to get all of those roads up to good condition by the end of this decade. Originally, the final year for the program was going to be 2030, but because we have used additional funds to front load the repair portion of the program, we're going to reach that goal by 2029. And if you live in District 1, you know that a significant number of those roads that are in poor and failed condition are in District 1. And if you ever want to know roads that are being addressed, just go to our website, which is www.district1.pima.gov, and you will see the road repair lists on our website. I want to leave plenty of time for questions. I see there's some already in the chat, but I want to finish by saying this. The essential duty of local government is to make sure that all of the services and supports that our constituents rely upon are delivered with the highest levels of equity, constituent service, and respect for the public tax dollars entrusted to us. That is the unsexy, unglamorous work of local government, but it is, again, the essential work of local government. And as I am getting to know the county better now that I've been in office a little over a year and a half, I'm starting to get a better sense not only of how it's organized, but how it operates. And that is helping me and my staff to come up with organic ideas about what we can do to improve the delivery of those services and supports to all of you. Pima County has 1.1 million residents. We have over 7,000 employees. We have a $1.9 billion budget. And again, it's larger than normal because of some of those pandemic relief funds that all local governments have gotten. But we spend the bulk of our time dealing with questions, concerns, problems that come to us from District 1 residents. And then we try and connect them with the county department that can best help them. That also is the essential work of local government, constituent service. And our staff prides ourselves on making sure that we return calls and emails within 24 hours at a minimum, and that we get you quick action on the needs and concerns that you bring to us. It is a great honor to serve District 1 on the Board of Supervisors. I will have a formal announcement when we get closer to 2024, but you can count on me being all in on running for re-election in 2024 because I'm very honored to be doing this work on behalf of all of you and all of Pima County. So thanks for listening to those remarks. And Larry and Mike, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thanks so much, Rex. We are so grateful that you are on the Board of Supervisors, and I'm just thrilled to hear that you're running again.
Count on it. Thank you.
Let's open the floor for questions. Mike, why don't you go right ahead?
Will do. We have a couple questions in chat at this point. Gail Camaras asks, if we no longer vote in precincts, are they obsolete as a political entity?
No, they're not. They are still the way that voters are organized, and they are also still the way that parties use their precinct committee people to get out the vote. So no, we don't use them for to tell people that they can only vote within their precinct, but I think precincts still serve an essential purpose in our electoral system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would add here that the Supreme Court recently decided that you can disqualify a voter for having voted outside their precinct, which, you know, is a common occurrence. So at working polls, we would have to send people to their precinct, and it was a real harassment and barrier to people participating. So I worked the polls at this latest election, and we did not have to send a single person away.
And Mike, just to add to that, when the precinct system was in place up until 2020, the largest number of provisional ballots were people who showed up at the wrong precinct. Yeah. We did have provisional ballots in the last round of elections, the August primaries, and they were mostly people who were on the automatic early voter list who got a ballot mailed to them, but who wanted to vote in person, mostly because of the overblown rhetoric against mail-in voting that is being propagated by Kelly Ward and other people within the Republican Party.
Exactly right. And I think probably the second number of largest number of provisional votes were people who had the wrong kind of ID. It's not that they couldn't ID themselves. They didn't meet the recommendations that were written by the state legislature to be able to identify yourself.
Absolutely.
So the second question we have is from Louise Good. She asks, which Democratic supervisor voted against the preschool system?
Supervisor Bronson, who represents District 3, voted against the program. However, since that time, she has voted in favor of procedural votes that we've had with regard to our contracts with the school district, the United Way, First Things First. And she's never been opposed to early childhood education. What she has said is that she wanted to see more of a commitment on behalf of the other jurisdictions. So I don't know what that means moving forward, but it's certainly been interesting to watch those votes, which were 3-2 on the initial vote, but have been 4-1 since then.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, Lillian Fox, you have your hand up. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I had a question about which day schools qualify for the county scholarship money. I understood that it was the K-12 school districts, but you just mentioned something about the nonprofits. Which day schools qualify and which don't?
Lillian, I appreciate the question. A significant number of the preschool providers are the K-12 districts, but there are also preschools in the nonprofit private sector who work through either DES, Department of Economic Security scholarships, or First Things First scholarships. And after they have exhausted those funds, because we have a policy with county scholarships that all other available funds, either from the state or from First Things First, need to be exhausted first. Then the county scholarships come into play. So it's a combination of both the K-12 districts and folks in the nonprofit sector.
So if a day school qualifies for the DES scholarships and the First Things First scholarships, then they also qualify once they've used up that money.
Yes, ma'am. And I'd encourage you or anybody else who's interested in learning more about the program to visit the program's page. A link to it is available on our website. And also it's obviously on the county's website, and you can talk with the staff that are overseeing that program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lillian.
Let's turn now to George Beverly, one of our members of the Strategic Advisory Committee of Democrats of Greater Tucson. George, go ahead with your question.
When you say transferable, George, do you mean transferred from one fiscal year to another? Okay. So the money doesn't go to the family, it goes to the provider. And to answer the first part of your question, we are working with the Pascua Yaqui tribe and also the Tohono O'odham Nation with regard to their existing preschools and making sure that folks within the tribe and within the nation who need access to those scholarships have access to them. We absolutely want any family who meets the income criteria to take advantage of these scholarships. And because there are a significant number of families of color in low socioeconomic strata districts and who go to those preschools, we suspect a significant number of families of color will be able to take advantage of these scholarships. And again, George, I would strongly encourage you or anybody who knows of a family that could be eligible for these scholarships but isn't taking advantage of them as yet, to be in contact with that office within Pima County so that they can get those families connected either with the school district that their child goes to or with a nonprofit preschool provider. I hope I answered your question. Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point, George, and we know that our partners in the K-12 sector are doing what they can to get the information out to their families using especially site staff at the various schools where preschools are located to get the word out. First Things First is also an organization that is helping to get notice of the program out there, as is the United Way. Certainly we do all that we can using our website and social media to get the word out as well. But oftentimes word of mouth is the best advertisement, especially for a program like this one that's just going into its second year.
All right, thank you for that. Let me turn now to Susie Anderson, who has a question. Go right ahead, Susie.
Hi, thank you, Larry, and thank you, Rex, for being here and having all this information. Mine is kind of two-part. Is it possible, instead of vouchers at the state level for private schools, that this money that they're trying to get be turned into pre-K schools? And two, are there any other governmental entities throughout the state, local entities, county entities who are following Tucson's lead with this program?
Susie, I really appreciate the question. And as somebody who's spent close to 30 years working in our public school districts, I am, of course, opposed to what the state legislature and Governor Ducey have just done to once again funnel more of our public tax dollars into vouchers that are designed to encourage people to go to private schools. Vouchers that, by the way, never fully cover the cost of private school tuition. And so if there were any kind of desire to use those funds to instead fund preschool education around the state, that would take an action by the state legislature. And what that would require is for us to elect more Democrats. And, you know, it's with regard to the statewide slate of Democratic candidates, I don't know that we have ever fielded a more qualified and more compelling slate of statewide candidates than than we have this year. And the contrast with the Republican slate could not be more stark. And the need to elect these people could not be more stark as well. Similarly, I think we have some outstanding candidates in the legislative districts throughout Pima County. I live in LD 18, and I'm excited with the 3 Democrats who we have running in LD 18. A lot of my district includes LD 17, and could not be more excited with the 3 Democrats who are running in that district. I think we're going to surprise a lot of people in LD 17, which was set up to be a sure thing for the Republicans. And I think because they have, just like they did with all their statewide candidates, nominated some genuine whack jobs, we have a chance in LD 17 that we might not have had otherwise. So I'm feeling really positive, but about our chances in November, but I'm realistic about them as well. And that's going to require all of us to work. With regard to the second part of your question, no, there is no county within Arizona that is doing what we are doing. I believe the city of Tempe has a preschool program, but I don't know much about it. But there were a series of articles, Susie, a few years ago in the Star. Sarah Garrett Gasson, the former editorial page editor of the Star, went to a number of cities and counties around the country. The county that includes the Research Triangle cities in North Carolina, the city of Cincinnati, the city of St. Louis, and looked at what those local governments were doing to reduce barriers to access to early childhood education. And we took a lot of information from their experiences when we were putting together our program.
Couldn't agree with you more. The Republican candidates, by and large, they're dangerous and they're extreme. You know, these are people who want to criminalize abortion for the woman and the doctor. They've been starving public education since 2010, and they deny climate change exists. Oh, as well as they want to overturn the 2020 election. So, yeah, this has never been a better time to vote for a Democrat. Let's see, Mike has his hand up. Go right ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we had a question from Karen Gleason in the chat. She's wondering if in upcoming years, whether all students will have pre-K scholarships available to them. I understand the program is means tested, I believe. If you could talk about what those what that means test consists of.
Absolutely. And Karen, our goal is to get to a point where any family that wants to send their child to preschool, but for whom income is the only barrier to doing that barrier will be demolished. Initially, when we set up the program, if your family had an income that was 200% of the federal poverty level or below, you qualified for a scholarship. We have since opened it up to even more families, and this is because of action that was taken not only by First Things First, but also by the Department of Economic Security at the state level. We are following their lead, and now the threshold is if your family income is 300% of the federal poverty level or below. And again, if you go on the page for the program on the county website, there's a link to it from our website. You can see the various income thresholds based on the number of children that you have in your family.
Okay, very good. I had a question for you, Rex, and I want to encourage everybody in the audience here to raise your hand or put a question in the chat, and that concerns the rental crisis. I understand that the supervisors are looking into making a plan to deal with the rental crisis and the rampant evictions in Pima County.
Well, we had a partnership until back in the spring with the City of Tucson and the Community Investment Corporation, whereby federal pandemic relief funds that went to either landlords or tenants who couldn't pay their rent because they were out of work during the pandemic was distributed by that tripartite group of the city, the county, and the Community Investment Corporation. And we did such a good job of distributing those funds that we were granted funds that had been given to the state of Arizona to distribute through the Department of Economic Security, but they were doing it much more slowly than we were. We also have applied for an additional round of those federal funds so that we can get even more of them out to landlords and tenants within Pima County. The city chose not to apply for a new round of rental assistance funds. So the program is now completely the responsibility of the county, but we are giving additional staffing to the folks in our Community and Workforce Development Department so that they can stay in front of the need and make sure that those funds are out the door and to the people who need them as quickly as possible. Another way of responding to your question, Larry, is that we had the county administrator put together an affordable housing task force, which was charged with overhauling the county's former housing commission and giving it a new charge to come up with a regional strategy, working with nonprofits in the other jurisdictions to address affordable housing in our area. If you pay more than 30% of your income each month towards housing, you are considered to be cost burdened. And that was an issue for a lot of Pima County families even before the pandemic. And so we are still in the process of looking at the recommendations from that task force and deciding how to move forward. But when we do, we're going to be working in partnership with the city and the other jurisdictions, and also with the Pascua Yaqui tribe and the Tohono O'odham Nation.
All right. I see Mike has his hand up again. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, this one's my question. We had Steve Kozacek on last week, and we mentioned this challenge to the state restrictions that the county was undertaking, and he was, needless to say, skeptical based on his own experience. So besides, I suppose, the legal talent maybe on our side, what gives you hope and optimism that that this challenge to state authorities is going to work and help us?
Well, as I mentioned, we have a former state legislator who's also an attorney, and the Everytown group who has been trying to take on these statutes around the country, who are willing to help us out. But I think something that we have that the city doesn't is that by statute, by Arizona statute, counties are the public health authority for their regions. And it is certainly the case that addressing gun safety or gun violence is a public health and safety concern. And for the state legislature to stand in the way of local governments who want to take action to address that issue, I think there's going to be a basis for challenging the legality or constitutionality of that statute. Is it going to be a tough fight? Absolutely it is. Let's not forget that Governor Ducey expanded the number of Supreme Court justices and packed them with more conservative ideologues. So this is going to be an extraordinarily tough fight. And that's why probably the best way to approach this matter is not legally, but politically. And again, it comes back to electing more Democrats to the state legislature and electing people like Katie Hobbs to serve as our governor and Chris Mays to serve as our attorney general. Chris Mays was just a guest at a Moms Demand meeting, and she was asked about this, and she said she could not be happier with the action that Pima County is taking. That's the kind of person that we need in the Attorney General's office, not the chameleon-like and erratic leadership that we've had under Mark Brnovich.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I thank you for taking on this fight. We need people to fight back and to highlight these issues for voters so that they know what the contrast is. So thank you, Rex. I appreciate it.
And Mike, that's really the bottom line, because even if we're not successful
Yeah.
either legally, if we're not successful legally, and if we're not successful in persuading the next governor and legislature to take this action, at the very least, we've let the public know that this statute is in place, and it's your state legislature that is standing in the way of both common sense and local control when it comes to addressing gun safety and gun violence.
Absolutely.
All right, George Beverly is back. Go ahead, George, with your question.
Well, one thing that's important to remember, George, is that there's a federal law that's been in place for quite a few years called the McKinney-Vento law. It is named after the two members of Congress who put it in place. And what it says is that if you're a child and your family, or you, because sometimes kids are on their own, become homeless, you don't lose the right to go to the school that you were enrolled in when you became homeless. And what we would do with regard to preschool scholarships is work with our partners in the K-12 sector and the nonprofit sector to make sure that any family, regardless of their housing situation, that was taking advantage of those scholarships was still able to do so.
I had a question as well, Rex. I
Sure.
read an article that said that there are a bunch of houses up in the foothills that were built too close to the Finger Rock Wash, and they're in a flood-prone area, and that the county might purchase those homes. Do you have any more information about that?
I have a lot of information about that, Larry, because those folks are my constituents. And I was just at a meeting with the folks from that neighborhood and representatives from the Regional Flood Control District, which is a county department. A county department, by the way, that is funded by a special secondary property tax. Every year, that department's budget has a certain amount of money for what's known as the Flood-Prone Land Acquisition Program, and it goes by the acronym FLAP. And the FLAP program has been used across Pima County to purchase structures that were built prior to the current floodplain regulations. This neighborhood was built in the 1960s, those homes were built in places right on the floodplain. They're not just in flood-prone lands, they are in the floodplain, and they would not be permitted to be built today. So what we do is we use a combination of local funds and federal grant funds to pay these people to acquire their properties and demolish the structures. It's great that the federal government recognizes the need for these programs through the Federal Emergency Management Administration, FEMA. They provide grant funds to acquire lands within flood-prone areas. They do that around the country. They've done it in Pima County for years. And so what we were talking about at that meeting was how to make these people whole. And the best possible outcome for them is if they have flood insurance, and most of them do. If they have flood insurance, the combination of their flood insurance payout and what they will get through this program will help to make them whole. There is a possibility, after we look at all of the federal and local funds that are currently available, that the Board of Supervisors would need to authorize additional funds for that program. But when I asked the staff from the Regional Flood Control District if they'd ever had to go back to the board for additional money in previous situations like this, they said no, they haven't, because usually the federal funds that are available through FEMA make it up.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and let's turn to Mike Bryan again.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we don't have any more questions from the chat, but I'll give you an opportunity to address this, which is we're facing a 21% cut in our allocation from the Colorado River. Tucson is the most junior water rights in the state. So we're going to have some issues. We've got $1 billion that was allocated to, at least in part, look for new sources of water, and at least in part to fund, resource retention and reuse, and making us more efficient in water use. Can you just take this opportunity to talk about your concerns about water in Southern Arizona and what you're planning on doing?
Well, I think any Arizonan that is not concerned with water is late to the party. We should have been addressing with the other Colorado River states in both the upper basin and the lower basin. We should have been addressing these issues years ago, and we have kicked so many cans down the road that it's embarrassing. And states have been looking at their own parochial interests and not considering not considering the need to act in partnership as much as they should be. As far as the county goes, the county is not a water provider. The main water provider in our region is the city of Tucson. They get close to 80% of both our residential and industrial allocation of CAP water every year. But what the county can do as the sewer provider, the main sewer provider for the region, we can look at ways of using effluent and treated water for irrigation purposes more broadly than they currently are. We also can work with the regional flood control district to use detention and retention basins to make the best possible use of our stormwater. There's a remarkable project that we just got federal grant funds for at Denny Dunn Park near Massengale Road that I'd encourage all of you to look at. That is the result of a grant that the flood control district got from the federal government. And then we also are going to be looking at the review and revision of the county's comprehensive land use plan. That's going to happen in the next year and a half or so. And within that land use plan, we'll be looking at what areas are appropriate for development and what standards we put in place for any new development. Some of those issues are addressed by state law, but there's a lot that we can do within the comprehensive land use plan to address those issues, just like we address land conservation and vegetation protection and protection of endangered species within the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. And then the last thing I'll say is that the county administrator has put together a water working group involving people from a number of different departments. And one of the things I have asked that working group to look at is what are some incentives that we can put in place for residential or commercial folks who voluntarily put water conservation measures in place on their property. So those are some things that that we're looking at the county. But again, we are not a water provider. I do think the city has done a good job of using recharge and banking of our CAP water. And if you hear the city of Tucson water director, he will tell you that we're in a lot better position than some of the other regions of the state because of what we have done to recharge and bank our CAP allocation.
All right, thank you, Rex. I'm going to have to draw this meeting to a close, but before we do, I was wondering if you could tell us, how can we find out more about the topics you discuss? And more importantly, how can we support you, especially with the gun violence effort? Well,
let me take that last question first, Larry. The most important thing that you can do to support our efforts to get that statute out of the way is to make your wishes known to the county attorney's office. and encourage them to not leave any stone unturned in terms of the legal research that they do between now and November when they report back to the board, and ask every single candidate for the Arizona legislature, regardless of whether or not they're a Democrat or a Republican, to make repeal of this statute a priority if they're elected. We certainly should be hearing that from all of the Democrats. But I think given the Safer Communities Act that passed Congress with several Republicans voting for it, that we have an opening here with some folks on the other side of the aisle, and we should take advantage of that. In terms of learning more about the issues that we talked about, you can always go to our website. I think Mike was kind enough to put a link to our website in the chat. And you can also call our office, 520-724-2738. And you can email us at district1, that's the number 1, at pima.gov. And we're happy to answer any questions that come to us. And I just saw something pop up. What is the title of the statute that I was talking about? It is Arizona Revised Statute 13-3108.
Rex, thanks again for coming to Democrats of Greater Tucson. I
Happy to
speak
do
on
it.
behalf of all of the members that we're so grateful to have you here today. And with that, I'm going to end the meeting, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week. So take care and have a good week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks all.